Let's have a talk, let's have a chat, talking about a little this and that. Hello and welcome to another episode of This and That. I am your host, Mary Easterling, and today we are not doing the vulgar school. In fact, this is in a response to something that has been on the news and on the internet where certain political officials who were ex-military made a statement to their military comrades in arms. You know, once you've been in the military, you're kind of always thinking about your fellow soldier, your fellow comrade in arms in the military. It's part of the mindset you get once you've been in the military. But before I begin to listen to anything else from This and That, go to talkingaboutthistandthat.wordpress.com and click on the podcast link. So they reminded them of an oath they took and an implication that came with it. And they encouraged them to, shall we say, do the right thing. Now, that said, POTUS took that very badly and decided to publicly say, these are bad people and they ought to be put to death. This treason, this terrible, horrible, blah, blah, blah. In fact, Christians pray for these people. They put their necks under the chopping block, which is Donald John Trump. Right, he's the chopping block, and he'll just find somebody to go chop their heads off. That's if he gets his way. One of those speakers in the original video, which you can find on YouTube, then went on and came on and said, hey guys, basically it was, hey guys, you know, I did this video with some other people and we said this stuff, and POTUS has decided he didn't like and he wants to kill me for things I said. Well, I mulled on this, and then I was reminded about an oath that every person under the sound of my voice that is a United States citizen, whether you were born into this or you became, you know, you paid your dues and blah, 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 and took your test and all of that. In fact, you had to say this by rote, by memory, in order to become a citizen. But it is still an oath. This ex-military congressional types who went on camera in this joint venture effort reminded the military that they were allowed to disobey an illegal order. The illegality is an unconstitutional order. That was what that was all about. The military swore an oath to defend our Constitution. These public officials swore an oath to uphold our Constitution. But did you know that you, dear citizen, anyone who's ever been in a public education environment or any function like take me out to the ball game, take me out to the, okay? Those events inevitably have this moment where everybody stands up and they do the thing. These functions have this thing that we do that has a national impact. So at games and other events, anyone who has ever placed hand over heart and said the following, I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and the republic for which it stands. Everything else that follows is descriptive of that public. In fact, you can break that sentence down to, I pledge allegiance to this flag and the republic it represents. The words of the United States of America is a descriptive of the flag. The flag is a symbol for the republic, which, by the way, puts into context some things that POTUS has said on the internet about, well, we have our republic, we're a republic. Turns out that's actually true. He's not lying to you. We are a republic, a democratically voted in republic, a democratically functioning republic, but a republic nonetheless. Okay. By implication, we are pledging an allegiance to the Constitution of the Republic that the government is using to govern it, as well as the government that is using the Constitution to govern the Republic. Google now has AI. So AI, what is a republic? AI replies, a republic is defended by both its constitution and its elected officials. As the Constitution provides the foundational laws and structure that bind the elected officials, who are then chosen by the people to exercise power within that framework. Therefore, it is not an either-or situation. The Constitution is the rule of law that makes the republic function, and the elected officials are the agents who operate under that law to govern, and that is AI's definition. It is our binding law that holds territories that we call states into one cohesive whole, so that one might go on a road trip across the state boundaries and not need special papers beyond a driver's license and insurance for the vehicle you're driving. You don't need a passport. I live in Florida. I don't need a passport to cross the Mason-Dixon line. Right. So then we're pledging an oath to both our Constitution and its officials to abide by both. But our paperwork that declares our national sovereignty also suggests that the government that facilitates the enforcement of the constitutional law of the nation, if it is not upholding its responsibility to abide by those laws, ought to be dealt with, and its language is violent. But we have a weapon, and that is the vote. We also have our words and freedom to come together and protest. We can also boycott, albeit because we are in a wartime situation, we still have to pay the income tax. I think. Do we? Maybe? Let's just put it this way. I don't think you're going to get away with not paying it without a hefty bill. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of debt relief places, but they're not going to be happy if you tell them that you protested and boycotted the IRS and didn't pay your taxes. I mean, I don't know. Can you get debt relief after that excuse? But still in all, as Christians, we have a second responsibility to pray for the end of all government that does not uphold and obey the Constitution we the people have decided was acceptable. This then means that every service person has in their lives taken 2 oaths, and any leadership that has served has taken 3, allegiance to, defense of, and upholding of the constitutional laws of the land. Why? Because the Constitution is part of the Republic. For while the standard citizen's allegiance oath is both to the law and the leadership, it's like obeying the laws of the road. You obey the rules first, and the orders of those who represent the rules along with them, such as the police and the highway patrol, etc. I mean, you come to a light that's out and you see a cop. You don't simply assume the rules of the road. The cop is going to change them. If you come to a stoplight and you have the right of way, but you see a motorcycle cop pull up and stop you because a long line of people with their headlights on is passing through the intersection, you're going to disregard the green light and obey the cop. I mean, how much trouble do you want that day? You got to go through the cop, then you got to hit the cars just to get through the intersection because you have the right of way. Right, that's the idea. But the military pledges to defend the Constitution, and federal officials both defend and support the Constitution in the discharge of their duties, faithfully or trustworthily according to the Constitution and the mandates of their function in government. Judges pledge to administer justice impartially and to perform their duties under constitutional law. So, I mean, if you're now an elected representative or you become a justice and you served in the military and you're a United States citizen, you're now 4-way sworn here, folks. I mean, we're just layering the cake. Yet it all goes back to the Pledge of Allegiance to the Republic, which is comprised of both the Constitution and its elected officials that govern according to that Constitution. Still in all, if we define the Republic as both the law and its representatives, then we still pledge an allegiance to the Constitution of the United States by virtue of its symbol, the flag of the nation. So I beg to ask this question. If the elected officials are not governing according to our Constitution, should we be okay with this? Remember, everyone, if you ever said that pledge, you have sworn an oath to abide by that law and to call the leadership to rule in accordance with that law. Now, Christians, as citizens, you may have made that pledge. Are we not told this? Let every soul be subject to the governing authorities. For there is no authority except from God, and the authorities that exist are appointed by God. Romans 13:1. Wait, we have a convicted felon, white-collar felon, in the Oval Office as POTUS. We question the motives and ideologies and lawfulness of the cabinet that he's surrounded himself with, and we really question the sanity of everyone else. Congress hasn't really been too congressy lately. There was actually a guy went on YouTube and made the comment that, well, we should have got together by now and dealt with something about this, that, and the other. We need to get off our lazy duffs and do something. We really haven't been doing our jobs as of late. Right, because POTUS keeps signing executive orders, kind of overriding the Congress, which I wonder if that's actually legit, legal, and you're allowed to do that. And Congress never gets their meat hooks into your executive orders to enact things into law or to at least go along with and approve such and thus, because not everything that you do executively is going to be considered the law of the land. It might be, we need to do a thing. We need to do it right now. We're just going to do this thing, and then it's going to be done, and we're finished with it. Or we need to move this money from this place to that place because this place doesn't need it and that place does, and shift around the buffalo in the bank, so to speak, of the funding of the government. And we're going to do this once, and it's not going to be a standardized thing, and we're not going to keep doing this. And so it's an executive order, but it doesn't necessarily have to become a bill and become a law. Now, not only do we have the Constitution, but we have the laws that are enacted in Congress. They're not necessarily amendments to the Constitution. They're part and parcel that goes along with the Constitution. Call it the Constitution's supplementary insurance that legality will prevail in this republic, which that fancy flag stands. Oh, we not so United States of America. Still in all, authority or order, so that you don't have chaos, so that your right to stay alive, your right to have some place to put a roof over your head and provide for food and water, and not encroach on somebody else's plot of someplace to put a roof over their head, called property rights, and the right to worship your deity, whatever it might be. See, as Christians, we must worship the one true and living God. Well, what about those that aren't Christian? They're not bound by that. They don't have to. I mean, it's going to suck in their hereafter, but still, they don't have to. They don't have to do what we do because they're not Christians. However, as Christians, we're told that God ordained laws, right, to protect us, to curb criminal activity, to curb sinful activity, to curb the iniquity of the heart, basically. Now, in the days when this was being put out, some of those laws were in direct contradiction with God's kingdom rules. But for the most part, like if you were Roman or Greek, part of the laws that God sort of ordained were religious, because the Greeks and the Romans were very religious people. They had something called the Pax Deorum, the peace of the gods. It was a national thing, and if you weren't participant in the keeping of the peace of the gods and bad things happened to the nation, why, you were persona non grata and an enemy of the state, as well as an atheist. Yeah, Christians really paid for their shift of allegiance from the gods of Roman Greece to the one true and living God, because all the other things were thrown right out the window. That would be the conflict of interest. Everything else is not a conflict of interest. I mean, kingdom law says don't kill. Why? Constitutional law or American law or jurisprudence says don't kill. That's a criminal activity. Don't engage in it, or you will be penalized, like you could lose your life. Death penalty, corporal capital punishment. Ooh. But, for the most part, is our Constitution telling us to live in such a way so as to not be peaceful and respectful of others' lives, liberties, and properties? No. In fact, to violate any of those things can be seen as a criminal act. So it is a temptation then to want to take a moralized approach to a secular law, not meant to reflect religious values, other than some of the most basic ideas of the Mosaic Law: life, or the right to be alive and not be murdered, freedom to have values, even immoral ones, as long as they are not encroaching and violating the persons and properties of others, to live peacefully. When immorality pushes hard against Christendom, there is a knee-jerk response to push back with morality. We're only exemplifying in our lives the character of Christ as salt and light, and to tell the gospel story pointing out what is considered sin without passing undue judgment. For we are not the judges as in condemnation. Jesus is. We can point it out, but we can't hate or condemn. If they do not believe, that is their choice, and condemnation, according to Christ, is the result. We also do not have to participate with their lives. If they have a need, we can meet it. Yes, this is loving your neighbor as yourself, even one who we might see as an enemy, which is also known as loving your enemy. Otherwise, the Constitution bans overt religious morality being pushed on the populace so as to not deprive private freedom. In other words, we are to have consideration for others. Mostly today, folks are not brought up to reciprocate this idea, so we will, quote-unquote, suffer or put up with a lot. Were we not told this would be the outcome? You stand out in the dark, and you flavor the vanilla of life with the savor of the fire of His Spirit, but you still made an oath, an allegiance to both the Constitution and its elected by the ordinance of people in the vote, to live in accordance with them, to abide with the laws, to obey their orders. It is what makes you bound citizens as human. The same oath of allegiance to God in sanctification is what makes you bound citizens in heaven. But what is the republic we pledged our allegiance to? Thought I'd Google it. So AI gives us this. A republic is a form of government where citizens elect representatives to hold power, in contrast to a monarchy where a ruler inherits their position. In a republic, the people are the ultimate source of authority, and the government's power is typically limited by a constitution. So then, by the people, for the people, and the people are the power in the vote. Yet today, most people are in the dark as to the Constitution, and what it tells us are the laws and the rights by which we may live. But just take a second, because we've had two terms bandied, okay? And it just hit me. What was our definition? Our educable artificial intelligence, has just told us that the republic is a form of government where the citizens are electing the representatives to hold power. The people are the ultimate source of authority. They call that a democracy. From demos, kratos, demos, the people, kratos, the power. Whereas the republicans are actually the true holders of the form of government that you, the demos, kratos, out there, are the ultimate source of authority over by virtue of the power of your ballot. My goodness. I'm going to come out and say this. For years, I was a Republican because as a child growing up, I remember the donkey and the elephant being opposite colors, number one. Number two, I remember that Republicans wanted to take a conservative approach to make sure that the nation was provided for equally. Democratic people wanted to rally the votes and the populace to get them in power for progressive issues, which led in other directions. Nowadays, the Republicans are well-to-do, rather disconnected. Oh, wait, the Demos Kratos side are just as well-to-do and disconnected. We have a problem here. They're all too well to do and very disconnected from their constituents. By the way, citizen also means constituent. So those of you in Christianity land that did not cast a vote because Holy Spirit said don't do it, by not casting a vote, you voted for what is in power now, and you broke your oath to your nation. If you make an oath, you're supposed to keep it. That is kingdom law. You're supposed to keep your word. That's why you don't give it very quickly. You weigh out your options before you make a commitment, because can you keep your word? Can you do this or not? That's a spicy meatball. Still in all, Christians, we have taken an oath as citizens, and we have the greatest tool in the toolbox of power, going to God, bringing the political issues of our nation to God and seeking His perspective and possible ideas, and then using our wonderful public forum of the internet to start a discussion about those ideas and how in the Constitution they can get traction, be implemented, and what the price tag for it might be. But it starts with prayer. God knows the voting records for every representative because He knows the heart of all these representatives on both sides of the aisle. But make no mistake, we are a republic where our citizenry, where we hold all the power and decide who will represent us in the Congress, because the president is only presiding over the Congress. You have to have somebody at the top to work under, and that's all the president is, the guy at the top. It's the Congress, it turns out, that is representing us and our needs, that holds the bulk and the balance of the power. The presider has to sign off on the stuff the Congress decides they want to have implemented into laws or even constitutional amendments, etc. It is not wrong to be somewhat politically aware and, if needs be, politically active. Now, this republic is national, but your states have to adhere to the same national constitutional laws, but they also have their own charters. It gets complicated. So one of your best things is learn. Learn about your state, your town, your county, your nation, and take what you learn into prayer and come away with things that you can pray, fodder for discussion, and maybe, if it gains traction, you actually can do your job as the authority of this republic to craft a better, saner nation. I hate the slogan, Make America Great Again, but this is an homage to the MAGA of Make America Good Again, good for everyone, the right way. Think about it. And that will do it for this episode of This and That. Until then,